in 1971, we started using more biological resources that the Earth can regenerate in 1 year. And that year, 1971, the day was December 25th. So on the December 25th, we have used all our resources for the year. And since then, that has just accelerated. And this year in 2022, this day fell on July 28th. So you can see from when the measurement started on the usage of biological resources until the 2019 is this graph. You can see how we have increased our use of biological resources, and we are giving less and less time for the Earth to recover, which is breaking out different ecosystem and is causing environmental degradation on different levels. We basically use almost 2 Earths from what we use as humans during 1 year. Let me just go a bit broader and introduce to you as economists or as a potential entrepreneurs a framework that is interesting to bounce your ideas. Like when you have a business idea, try to analyze from these 2 perspectives. One is the environmental ceiling, and these on the outer side of this circle are the 9 planetary boundaries that with our activities we are affecting. So we have heard about climate change, and we usually know what climate change is, that is caused by the CO2 and the greenhouse gas emissions that is caused mainly by burning the fossil fuels. So that's climate change. Then we have fresh water use. All the water we need for the production process, for the services, for all the transport, for all the mines that are being mined. So it's the fresh water use. The nitrogen and phosphorus cycles are also important for the ecosystems, and this is generated basically from the burning of the fossil fuels, and the nitrogen that is in the atmosphere mostly is also affecting the ecosystem on planet Earth. The ocean acidification, you have probably heard about this. Acidification means the oceans are the biggest absorbers of CO2. And when they absorb CO2 in the water, they basically influence the algae and the plants in the oceans, because they get eventually saturated, or there is much more CO2 in the ocean that is needed, that is causing the ocean acidification, which means you have heard about the coral reefs that are dying, that are being from green to gray. So these are dead coral reefs that they have enough oxygen because of the too much CO2 in the oceans. The chemical pollution from industrial processes, the atmospheric aerosol that is going in the atmosphere, the ozone depletion, the biodiversity loss, the land use that we use for agriculture, for animal farming, and all these 9 planetary boundaries needs to be taken into consideration whenever activity is being planned. We usually get stuck to climate change or the biodiversity loss, but there are many others that needs to be taken into consideration. Then, so this is the environmental ceiling. And then this inside is the social foundation for humans to have decent lives. Water, income, the access to education, resilience, having political voice, and living in a democratic society, jobs, energy, social equity, gender equality, health, food. So these are some basic criteria that we want to meet in order to have decent lives. So to meet these needs, but inside of the environmental ceiling. This is the donut concept that is being presented by Oxford Professor Kate Revert, and you can see the sources from donut economics. This is the overshoot and the shortfall of the social foundation in general for humanity. So even though we are overshooting the biodiversity loss, you see that climate change is already being going towards the climate target of global warming. We also see, and these are some others that are still not quantified. So we are overshooting many of the ecological ceiling with our way of life, but also shortfalling on some basic access to services that are needed for humans to have a decent life. So it's very important to see, when you have a green idea, to see how is this improving the social foundation of people. Is it going to improve the access to energy, access to health, access to income, access to peace and justice? Are they going to create spaces for their political voice to be heard? So see what are the where are you going to contribute socially, but also how are you affecting, and which of the planetary boundaries are going to be affected. This is, again, if you want to look more about this, it's on the donut economics. Then I'm going to continue with some other narrative on a macro level that is important for green entrepreneurship in general, that we are aware, and that is the green growth versus degrowth narratives. We have seen in the previous picture that even the current economy, and we are living in the best times of humanity in terms of growth, in terms of technological developments. So even though this is the case, we are still shortfalling social foundations for humans, but also overshooting ecological ceilings. And the current economic and in the past hundreds years of economic mantra has been economic growth. So as entrepreneurs, it's important to understand that the narrative, that there are two basic narratives that are going on at the moment. One is the green growth and another is a degrowth narrative. The green growth narrative, it basically says that we can continue growing the economy, just greening the societies, just have more renewable energy sources, just focus on energy efficiency, just focus on waste management and conservation of the forests and biodiversity, and we can still grow the economy. And this is generally the UN, the United Nations, but not also the EU and other main drivers of the economy. The World Bank, the IMF are promoting the green growth narrative, which means low carbon, resource efficient, and socially inclusive. But again, as I said, growth in employment and income driven by public and private investments in economic activities that will allow reduce the carbon emissions, enhance energy and resource efficiency, and prevention of loss of diversity and ecosystem services. This narrative is really nice and it's really appealing because it says that we can continue as we are and we can still enjoy our comfort lives while protecting and restoring the environment, the ecosystem services, and all the other criteria. The degrowth scientists and movement is saying that that has not been shown so far, that the narrative is nice, but decoupling GDP, the economic measure of success, the gross domestic product. So growing the GDP and decreasing the pressure on environment has not still been proved that it can work. And this has been one narrative that's going on from the 70s when the limits to growth study was published. And the degrowth narrative says that we should challenge growth as a mantra, and we should live in an economy that meets the needs of the people without overshooting the Earth's ecological ceiling. That it's not possible to grow the economy on a macro level and achieving the climate targets and protecting the environment and the biological loss. So going from green economy and the two basic narratives going on there, I'm going to the green jobs. So from the economic perspective, the environment is very important for the jobs. It employs over 1.2 billion people. And these are according to the statistic of the ILO, which is the International Labor Organization, which is a UN institutions. Green jobs are defined as decent jobs that contribute to preserve or restore the environment. And it can be found in traditional sectors such as manufacturing and construction, or in new emerging green sectors such as renewable energy efficiency. Again, this is the narrative and definition of the United Nations. And it says that a green job can also be if you are mining for steel that wind turbines need to employ. You know, the wind turbines is still a renewable energy source, but the steel that is needed needs to be mined from the mountains. So if you mine steel for a renewable energy source, it's still considered to be a green job. There are many movements and scientists that are constraining this and are questioning if this is a green job, if we're still mining the mountains for minerals and ores for sustaining the renewable energy transition. There is also the question of social, that the green economy and the green jobs are basically coming from and should come from bottom up. Like in the energy transition, where we want to move from fossil fuels to renewable energy sources, it's not the point that the big corporations invest in huge solar power plants and they employ people based on the corporate investment, but and the ownership is still on the corporation that has the money to invest. But still, the idea is that people join in so-called energy communities and energy cooperatives, where they can install solar rooftops on their households and they to start to produce the electricity and be the owners of the electricity while saving and selling the electricity to the grid. So this is also a narrative that can be also translated into the green jobs, like in terms of where green jobs coming from. Are they coming from the corporations, or they're coming from the small entrepreneurs and micro enterprises? At the enterprise level, green jobs can produce goods or provide services that benefit the environment, green or clean transportation. However, these green outputs, again, are not always based on green production process and technologies. What it would mean is that if you want to build a solar power plant, you need the aluminum, you need the minerals and the ores. And in order for you to get the solar photovoltaics to that field, you need to use the transportation, which is basically based on fossil fuels, on oil and diesel and all that. So the whole infrastructure is basically based on fossil fuels. The whole economy is driven by mainly oil. And whatever you do in this kind of economy, there's always the interactions that you're going to have less or more polluting or influencing the environment, either the mining of the minerals that you need, or in the transportation, or in the waste process. So what happens in the solar power plants, like after they have used, they also have expiry date, like after 20 or 30 years, we'll have solar power plants that are in the fields that either needs repairing or they need recycling. But again, even the recycling is very energy intensive process. Going from those general narratives that I mentioned, and maybe spark your curiosity for question or for more research. You have probably been introduced with the Green Comp, and I want to say that the European Union is, of course, very seriously taking all these issues and also integrating competence models into the education system. You have been introduced with the European Sustainability Competence Framework that basically consists of 12 competences that are organized in four areas. So these competences is to value sustainability, support fairness, promote nature. You would question why supporting fairness can be a green competence. But basically justice, climate justice, or environmental justice is one of the key principles of the environmental movement, because the most vulnerable countries like Africa, Asia, Turkey, and in general called the global South countries have been the least responsible for the emissions of CO2 or the environmental degradation, but they're suffering the most the consequences of climate change and the global warming, and also have the least capacities in terms of buildings and infrastructure and money and investments, so the families can continue to work like after a heat wave or after floods. So it's very less resilient than the rich countries that have been exploiting the global south for decades. So climate justice and environmental justice is at the core of having green mindset, and that's why one of the supporting frameworks that also has been recognized in the competence framework from EU. Of course, promoting nature, it's important as well, but also here I must say that we're going to miss the point if we externalize nature from ourselves. It's very important that we understand that we are part of nature. That when we talk about environment and nature, these are just terms that has been coined or that have been introduced in the last hundreds of years, when we have introduced the dual thinking. The dual thinking means that we as humans are one and all the rest is something else. Even environment and other bodies and other humans that are not like us are also something else. So this dual thinking has contributed also to seeing the environment as just a resource, not as a living ecosystem with under earth processes, with bacteria and fungi that are communicating between each other. It's just seen as research that you come, you take, and use it for your own purposes. So just be careful when you say promoting nature, just recognize that we are part of that and that we should come back to non-dual thinking and not divide ourselves from nature. It's very important. That's why I started with the macro perspective of systems thinking. It's important you understand how they influence. It's not only your idea and your area, but they are also influenced by many others. When you have production of product you want to sell, or when you have a service you want to get there, are connected to some services that come before and that should come after. So understanding and building systems thinking is crucial for now and for the future. Critical thinking of the current narratives and dogmas that we have, that has put us in the place we are now, that has put us in all the red flags that I've shown you, like in the donut. So just question growth. When people say economic growth, does the richest countries in the world have to continue to grow as well? Are there countries that need maybe like economic growth, like the global south countries, but can the rich countries continue growing based on where are we going at? And is it economic growth related to well-being? There are many studies showing that there are people are happier with just the simplest of relationships and love, and not with the economic income and resources that they and the materials that they possess. And for all these things, for you need critical thinking. You need to develop this critical thinking. The problem framing, then continue onwards is the future literacy, the adaptability, exploratory thinking, and then acting for sustainability. This is where we come in place. This is where all of us come in place, where we have political agency and we live in societies where we can influence some decisions on, even starting from family to schools or universities, to your community, and maybe in the ministries and governments. We have the agency to change things, and all changes have come and have been driven by this kind of talks and this kind of sharing and learning where people join together and demand something different. Collective action is something I've mentioned already. Individual initiative is still important, and probably the most important individual initiative you can take is around food and your food choices, because animal agriculture is taking 75% of our land use. It's not for the animals to be bred, but it's for the animals to eat. The soya fields and all the food that animals need to have in the industrial farming is basically cutting forests and cutting trees in order to make more room for animal agriculture. So on an individual initiative, the only thing you can do, which is most impactful, is food and your food choices. And the last slide that I found interesting while I was reading this new research, which I'm going to share with you, and of course, like this PowerPoint with all the links, is this green skills framework. So what I liked is that these are the instrumental skills that are currently in our economy, that we are being developing, that we need, that we have. But this is very interesting, transformative skills for a green transformation. In skills for green jobs is being referred basically to, as I said, the current skills that we have. It's just we need to have a green mindset and a bit of a larger picture. So skills aimed at fulfilling requirements of green jobs, supporting the transition to a low carbon green economy. Then green life skills, these are cross-cutting skills that serve both the technical, which we can see this as more technical, instrumental and adaptive transformative ends. The generic capacities, and this will be very important, adaptability, because we'll have many changes as we are seeing energy crisis, economic crisis, environmental crisis, so we'll need to adapt to changes which are happening really fast and rapid. Collaboration, collaborating, all these are in the green life skills that we need, like no matter where we work and what we work. It's just life skills that we need to adopt in order to endure and to be resilient. And then this is very interesting one, which I think are at the stage where we are discussing green transformation. Adaptive skills aimed in transforming unjust social and economic structures. Ability to analyze unequal systems of power, coalition building, collective action, disruptive versus normative thinking, environmental stewardship, future and anticipatory thinking, political agency, reflexivity, respecting the diverse viewpoint, solidarity, transcultural, transspatial, transtemporal mindset, develop traditional and indigenous knowledge. What I mentioned about duality and non-duality, since the beginning of humans, which is 200,000 years ago, and with the modern society from agriculture, maybe 70,000 years ago, we have always have seen that we're part of nature. In the last 500 years, and this is the culture of the indigenous, is the animistic beliefs that we are animals and that we are part of the ecosystem. And anytime we have taken from ecosystem, it has been with reciprocity, with being grateful, with giving a gift to nature, because we have to take now in order for us to survive. But in the last 500 years, in the economic model, we have, and of course here is the religion as well, is being influencing our cultural mindset of we are separate from everything else, and we have the right to use resources and everything around us for our purposes, and the divinity of humans. So it's very important to come back to valuing traditional and indigenous knowledge of the people in the forests and the people that we once were. And of course, it's working with complexity. So these are some, I hope, stimulating thoughts and mindsets that I shared with you. And please, I hope we have some time for some questions and for some sharing. Thank you.